Hi, Cody.
So everybody's muted, so we don't get any weird feedback.
Okay. All right, 10 a.m. Here we go. First of all, if you were all here in person, you could have some jelly beans that I just got from Trinka. So thank you, Trinka, for the jelly beans. She knows that I'm a diabetic and will probably drop dead in a diabetic coma any moment during this session, because I've had about 6 of them. So I hope everybody is having a good morning, and it's beautiful out, 80 degrees. Oh, hold it, I'm in the wrong place. I'm in Marshfield. So let's begin with what's transpired since our last week and our last meeting. So not too much. I've had some conversations with Catherine from MAR, and as it stands right now, and we're going to go over the listing contract first. But the listing contract, a lot of contracts are being redone by MAR, and they are not done yet. As everybody knows, this, thank you, Christine. As everybody knows, this doesn't go into effect until mid-July. But what we're going to be doing as a company is initiating things now, because we're going to need some time to get people educated. And as I've said, we're going to be doing one-to-one with all of you individually to make sure that you absolutely positively understand how this process is going to work. As I said in last week's Zoom meeting, if we get into a problem with a customer or a client, it's not covered with errors and omissions. So we really need to make sure that everybody understands and gets this right. And for those of you that are doing this part-time, this is going to be a challenge. You're going to need to really step up your game if you're going to be in real estate. Selling a house once a year is probably going to be going the way of the dodo as things progress over the next couple of years. But we'll see. So let's first tackle the exclusive right to sell listing agreement. It's the same agreement right now as we speak as we've had. So the only real change here is going to be in your explanation. Thank you. It's going to be in your explanation to your clients. And we were doing a meeting last night up in Braintree on Zoom, and no, not at Zoom, I'm sorry, on video. And we were talking about how you explain things to your clients. And there are very few forms that you really need to know cold in this business. The listing contract, the buyer's contract, there's like 4 or 5, but you're really going to need to master these agreements and be able to explain them to your clients. So let's go over the exclusive right to sell, the listing agreement. It's number 709. I'm not going to go through the entire agreement because you all know about that. But when you're talking to your clients, you've got to tell them what's going on with with this lawsuit. They're going to ask. And what we've done is we've created a document to provide in your marketing piece, and it's entitled "To Our Seller Clients." And I'm going to read that for you. It's not perfect. I mean, what I've tried to do on this document is try to explain everything as best I could, but simplify it in a one-page document. It's something that you can read through and kind of go over with them. You can include it, like I said, in your marketing package. They should have it. And if they have any questions and you don't have the answers, you have them call me. So let's just go over this one real quick. A brief history of the way things were. For decades, real estate commissions were split between the listing agent and the selling agent. This symbiotic relationship between these two parties with different agendas worked both to the benefit of the seller, because we could expose the property to a greater field of buyers, and the buyer because they would have expert representation for what is undoubtedly one of the most complicated transactions most people face in their lifetime. And you know what? Let me take a pause right there. I've heard a lot of chat, uh, both on news and on social media, that this is the end of buyer representation and that people are going to be going direct to the listing agent. I don't believe that's true. I don't believe this is going to be that we are travel agents and we're going to be erased from existence. There are just too many complications with a real estate transaction, whether it be the appraisal, the financing, the home inspection. There's just too many things that can go wrong. And without an intermediary, meaning you, it's going to fall apart. So I don't see that we're going to be X'd out of existence. So that's the way things were. So how the lawsuit changed the real estate landscape. The lawsuits made against the National Association of Realtors and a number of the largest nationwide firms made the argument that sellers didn't have a clear opportunity to decide for themselves how much to compensate a cooperating broker or provide them the choice not to compensate them at all. The courts sided with the plaintiffs in this case. Although we disagree with the court's judgment, we must abide by it. So where do we go from here? Your first instinct might be that you don't want to compensate the buyer's broker at all, but it's important that you understand the facts. From this point forward, all real estate agents working with buyers must be engaged by that buyer, and an offer of compensation must be established in writing with said buyer. Starting officially in July of 2024, your success agent will help guide you with the compensation decision and give you the pros and cons of each choice. The bottom line, however, is that the buyer's agent's compensation will have already been decided and contractually agreed to between the buyer and their agent. Should you elect to not offer compensation, any offer you receive will be inclusive of compensation being paid by the selling agent or to the selling agent from their buyer. However, please understand that if you choose not to compensate the buyer's agent through the proceeds of the transaction, it would mean that the buyer would be responsible for compensating their own agent. This could potentially short-circuit their ability to buy your home, or even more likely be reflected in the offer price they propose. It's our belief that compensation should be offered because we believe it's the essential marketing tool at our disposal in terms of reaching the greatest number of buyers. So that's kind of a mouthful. I realize that, but it's factually correct. And you're going to need to kind of grasp this whole concept and try to explain it to them in the most simplified way that you can. But our company policy is going to be that we offer compensation to buyers agents the same way that we have in the past. Being, one of the bigger companies in Massachusetts, we're certainly not going to lead the way and try to eliminate buyer's agency from the equation. So when you talk to somebody and you're talking about a commission, you're really going to, instead of saying our commission is 5%, it's 4%, you're going to say it's 2.5% and it's 2.5% to the buyer's agent. That's what we want to offer. So you're going to kind of break it down. Now, you might be saying that that's exactly what we did before. And that would be true, because if you look on the exclusive right to sell listing agreement, there's a place in there that says, we're going to offer out 2.5% or 2% to the buying agent. So, but the exclusive right to sell listing agreement is going to be changing. And it's going to be changing probably in the next 3 weeks. Well, it may take a little bit longer than that. But So we're going to break it down to 2.5, 2.5, or 2 and 2. The lowest that we're going to go is 2. All right. Now, if you get somebody that says, we're not going to compensate the other broker at all, you'd be essentially taking the property at 2.5, which is lower than our threshold of 4. So that would be a no-no. So, if somebody says, I'm absolutely not paying the other broker, no way, no how, then you're going to have to probably pass on that listing. It's no different than if they said, hey, we're not going to pay you 4, we're going to pay you 2. That's it. So in this new document to our sellers' clients, there's a clause in here that says why buyer representation is important. We need to sell this to the sellers. We need to explain to them why it's so important and an integral part of the transaction. So buyer's representation is essential. When both parties are represented by professional real estate agents, the interests of both parties are taken care of, and the transaction will proceed much more smoothly. When there is fair dealing and transparency between the sides of a transaction, suspicion and mistrust can't get a foothold, and again, everything proceeds with more ease. That serves both the buyer and the seller. So you're going to need to explain why buyer's agency is important and why, even though they're representing the buyer, it helps them. So if you don't understand that, make sure you talk to me in our one-to-one meeting, and we'll go over it in a little bit more detail. Catherine, when she was with us last week, talked about who really pays the commission. That's a argument that you're probably going to get from time to time with your sellers. They're going to say, well, so I'm paying the commission again, right? Well, not exactly, because traditionally the commission was negotiated with the listing agent, and at settlement, you would see it in the seller's column on the settlement statement. The case has been made, however, that it's the buyer's funding that makes the transaction occur in the first place, as the buyer is the one bringing the money to the table. Therefore, it's logical to assume that both parties have a hand in making the transaction come together, and that compensating the agents for their time and effort should be done via the transaction. It really doesn't matter which column it lands on, because both the seller and the buyer had a 50-50 stake in making this all happen. That's all true, and it's something that you're going to need to sell and explain to your sellers. In summary, sellers have always had choice when it comes to commission. Today, these choices are simply spelled out in more clear and concise terms. If you have any questions or need further clarification, you're welcome to contact me personally at my cell phone number. So if you get into trouble with your clients and you go, you know what, talk to Steve, and you can ask him about this or ask him about that. I'm happy to step in. But that doesn't negate you from really encompassing all of this yourself and knowing what to say when they say this. It's no different really than, if they said to you during your listing presentation, will you cut your commission? Will you advertise in the Boston Globe? You need to have an answer for everything that they're going to ask. So that is our new seller's client doc. And we talked about the exclusive right to sell listing agreement. So do I have any questions so far? Let me see.
Yes, you do, from Cody.
Yep. All right. Cody's asking, does that mean if the seller will not offer compensation, we cannot take the listing? I mean, this is a new thing, but I mean, I would say that you would have to explain to them, Cody, that if we're going to only take 2.5, that the offer is going to be, whatever offer you get is going to be inclusive of another commission. So we're better off taking, and offering compensation from the get-go and explaining to them that any offer is going to come with that attachment. What if they want to officially, what if they want to not officially offer compensation, but will look at the net from the offers? We could do that. We could do that, but I would try to advise against it because I think that it's better to offer compensation, and people are going to be calling you now and saying, "Hey, Cody, are you going to be offering compensation?" And if you say no, then they're going to need to, get ready with that form. Another question here, buyer representation also takes away some legality issues for sellers. I don't know about that. I think it's Joseph. That's kind of a tricky one. Let me get back to you on that one. Tricia, are you open to having the document edited? In my view, it is too complex. It reads at college level plus, and many sellers are below this reading level. It's funny, Tricia, because Lisa and I went over had the same exact conversation. Had mentioned that it's too complex, and I said, well, it is complex, but how do you dumb it down?
I'm happy to assist. I think there are, so we could at least try. I would be happy to help.
Okay. All right. I mean, it's not a done deal. If you think you can edit, or make it a little better or make it clear, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, great.
All right. So, let's go over to our buyer clients. And you guys might have the same complaints about that. And again, I broke it down to a one-page document. The first part, a brief history of the way things were, is exactly what it was on the other document. So we'll skip over that one. How the lawsuit changed the real estate landscape is a little bit different. The lawsuits made against the National Association of Realtors and a number of the largest nationwide firms gave sellers an opportunity to decide for themselves how much to compensate a cooperating broker or whether to compensate them at all. It's important that you understand that henceforth, any real estate agents working with buyers must be engaged by that buyer, and an offer of compensation must be established in writing. Starting in July of 2024, buyers agents will no longer see an offer of compensation in MLS. We must rely upon our contract with you to ensure that we get paid from the transaction. What we intend on being paid from the successful purchase of your home will be established in that contract, and it will be a condition of the sale. Buyer, please understand that once a fee has been agreed upon, it cannot be changed. Our job is to represent you to the fullest effect. Now, let me explain that part. What we don't want to happen, if we have a buyer client and we don't want to get in the middle of the negotiations. And in all the trainings I've done over the years, I've always mentioned the fact that the moment the realtor gets into the middle of the mix, it blows up big time. And let me give you an example. Let's not even use, our present day situation, but let's say that I've had many times where my buyer has come to me after I've shown them 20, 30, 40 properties and said, Steve, we're like $5,000 away and I'm not going up and they're not going down. I guess leaves you. So you're going to have to kick in $5,000 of your commission. The moment you say yes to that, you are just such on the hook for this transaction. You have to eliminate yourself from the equation. You have to say, you know what, guys, this is between you and the seller. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. We'll have to find you another piece of property. But don't put me on the hot seat that it's because of me that this deal isn't going to go together. Because then we're going to be negotiating our commission at the home inspection. We're going to be negotiating our commission when the mortgage company wants to extend the mortgage and add points. It's just a slippery slope that you really should never go down, never touch your commission. So I'm going to carry on here. So it's also important to understand that in certain cases, a seller may refuse to offer compensation to the buyer's agent. In this case, you would be responsible for paying our fee. Sellers may also offer a sum that doesn't meet our agreed upon fee. In that case, you would be responsible for making up the difference. The bottom line is what the seller decides to offer for compensation to you, to your agent, will need to play a factor in how much you decide to offer for that home. Therefore, it's critical that you know if there's an offer of compensation to your agent before you make an offer on the home of your choice. So again, it's a little complicated, and these people have not done this before, and you're going to have to really grasp this concept in order to be able to explain this. Last part is why it's absolutely essential to be represented. When purchasing something as consequential as a home, it's imperative to be represented. The listing agent does not represent you, will not advocate for you, and will not be looking hard at the home for potential problems or future issues. Engaging us as your realtor means you have hired a product expert and not a salesperson. That means we can give you unbiased advice that has no tie to our commission. We can truly be your advocate, and that is priceless. We understand that this is new. It's new for everyone. But despite this new and evolving real estate development, it's our belief that this is an extremely positive change for buyers. Without an engagement agreement, most realtors aren't going to spend a lot of time and effort helping you find a house. Now you are a true client, and our roles and responsibilities have been defined, which will mean better service for you. So again, I truly believe that. I think that when we meet people and we discuss having them sign up as a client, it's really going to change the landscape in terms of how things work in real estate. In other words, when you meet somebody now, and this is before things are rolling with the buyer contracts, you show them a couple houses and you kind of forget about them sometimes. Sometimes you don't. But now, if you take them on as a client, you have to find out their true motivation. You have to find out how serious they are about buying something in the next 60 to 90 days. Whether they have the money right now, whether they don't, whether they're approved for a mortgage, whether they have the deposit. You're going to really have to do your homework in terms of finding all these things out. It's really no different than when you go on a listing presentation and they say to you, yeah, just put it on 50 grand higher. And they're not serious about selling. They'll only sell if they get somebody that fell off the turnip truck. So that would not be a good listing to take because you're just going to be at their beck and call for the next 6 months and they're going to make you miserable. So the same is now happening with buyers. So you may want to come up with a list of questions that you would ask your buyers to make sure that it's a good match for the two of you. And we're going to go over the buyer contract in just a minute and go over a little bit more about that. Again, I am open to discussing the content of to our buyer clients and to our seller clients and making it simpler if that's possible for a complex situation. And let's go over the buyer contract. So the exclusive buyer agency agreement, which is number 701 in the MAR forms and is listed now in dotloop under buyer documents, I believe the title is. The important takeaways here are that when you sign this agreement, okay, this is somebody that you're diligently going to be working with. And I would explain to your buyers that, we're going to be in contact pretty much every day. Every time a new listing comes up, I'm going to be calling you, you're going to be calling me. And the term of agency, that's kind of a complicated one too. I've gotten lots of different opinions about that, but my best guess on this one is that you should do something for 60 to 90 days. I think, after 90 days, your relationship gets harder and harder to maintain that relationship. And if they haven't bought anything in 60 to 90 days, you may have shown them 20, 30, 40 houses. So that decision as to how long you want that time period to be is up to you. But keep in mind that once we sign these and you have a buyer client, it's a very similar relationship as it is with probably more intense relationship than it is with your seller clients. I'm going to close the curtains for a second. Yeah, that's better. So, so with your seller clients, I mean, I've told everybody for years and years that communication is the absolute key to a successful relationship with your clients. So that means texting, that means phone calls, that means emails. And don't forget that when you have a problem with one of your sellers, it's not the time to email. We had an agent that's no longer with Success years and years ago that every time she had a problem with her client, she wrote this huge email to them. And then they would write a huge email back. And it just went downhill from there. So if you've got a problem, get on the phone, not a text, get on the phone with your clients and talk to them. But the whole communication process is texting and phone calls and personal visits. So there's going to be a lot of that with a buyer client, probably more than there would be with a seller client. So we talked about the term of agency, whether it be 60 to 90 days. And let's go over the broker's compensation. Again, that would be your decision. But I would say, at a minimum, 2%, between 2 and 2.5%. So I'll let you all decide upon that. As far as the retainer is concerned, as discussed last week, I am a strong believer in retainers and letting people know that, hey, this is a real relationship. We talked about, a $1,500 retainer, and that would go into escrow. And then if you wanted to pay out $2,000 at the closing as a bonus, so they would get $500 for putting down a $1,500 retainer. That makes sense. We'll probably do a separate little session on that. So 2.5%. And that, I got a couple questions here. What Marnie's asking, what if you have someone you've been showing property already for a couple of years? Yikes. Okay. Well, if you've been showing them properties for a couple of years, hopefully you're not showing them every single day. The first thing I'd be worried about is their motivation. But there's a lot of, I was talking to Dave Lasigda last night, and he worked with somebody for 3 years and is closing this afternoon. And he's all excited about that. And congratulations, Dave. But in terms of this person that you've been showing property for a couple of years, Marnie, you're going to need to sign them up with a buyer's agency agreement right away. So you don't have to put 60 to 90 days in that case. You could put 6 months, you could put a year, whatever you would want to do. Um, that's a funny comment, Sean. Let me see. All right, so that's the exclusive buyer agency agreement. All right, so any questions on this one? Just type in what your questions are. Somebody asked, how about until they buy? You can't do that. You've got to put a designated period of time. And like I said, I wouldn't go too far because you know, the buying process is something that evolves along the way. You might get sick of them, they might get sick of you, and how you present that to everybody, to your clients, is going to be an evolving thing. There have been talk about saying, well, you know, after I show you 25 homes, then I'm going to charge you, you know, $50 per home that I show you. There's a lot of things that are going to be happening in the next 6 months. And it's going to be interesting to see how this all shakes out. So, Joseph, I believe we as real estate people are much more hypersensitive about the lawsuits. I expect most sellers and buyers are not following these findings as we are. I word, reword in the forms, and just let me see.
He's saying that he would just reword the forms. I agree. That sounds like a good idea.
Are you which forms is he talking about? The forms that we just created?
Yes. So instead of mentioning lawsuits, reword it to something softer. I think that might be a good idea.
We can discuss that. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. I don't know if it's going to be a big secret though. You know, I mean, everybody is talking about this. And I think everybody's already going to know that, I mean, it's been on the national news, it's been on CBS News, ABC, CNN. You'd have to live under a rock to not know that it was a lawsuit that created all this. John is asking, I'm in the middle of selling new construction to a buyer. The home will not be completed until September. We've already signed the P&S. Should I now have the buyer sign a buyer's agreement, or am I covered from the P&S? You're covered from the P&S, John. Again, things don't go into effect until July of 2024, and the purchase and sales agreement specifies how everybody is to be paid. One thing to note, I mean, I've seen you know, 95% of purchase and sales agreements that I've seen, and I've seen tens of thousands, specify success is to get 2.5 and Century 21 is to get 2.5. What that 5% that don't say that have a larger commission and aren't splitting evenly with you. Now, it really doesn't matter because that's going to happen probably all the time. You know, people are going to be going out there saying, well, I want a 6% commission and I'm going to take 4 and I'm going to offer out 2. Or they may not offer out anything at all. But that's going to be an interesting development as well. Chris, I'm guessing NAR will have some guidance in the transition once the settlement is passed through the court. That is true. That is true. When I talked to Catherine Taylor, they are awaiting the approval by the courts to before they start modifying and distributing documents. I'm sure that we'll probably do something similar, and the documents that we create over the next week or so will certainly be changing in the next 6 months. So we've talked about the these 2 documents. We've talked about the exclusive buyer agency agreement, and we have 2 more documents to talk about. Brenna's asking, is there a chance this July start date could be pushed? Absolutely. Absolutely, that could happen. So you never know, which is why MAR is not real hip on creating documents right now, because they know everything could change in 2 months. I'm getting another question here. I listed property in Boston on Tuesday and informed the seller that future buyers may start offers with a letter of intent to purchase, and the offer price and terms may be dictated by how the seller responds to that letter of intent. Well,
As in, would they offer compensation as part of the offer, or would they have to pay their agent separately? That just involves the seller in that final price more so.
well, the seller's going to need to make a decision in terms of how they compensate, or whether they're going to compensate at the beginning. I don't think this letter of intent to purchase is probably going to gain traction. I think everybody's probably going to be going down the MAR path in terms of how things are presented in terms of the commission. So we'll have to see about that. Let's go over seller's agreement to compensate cooperating broker addendum number 310. So when you're working with your buyer and you have created the offer, this addendum is going to be part of the offer, and it's submitted by the buyer to the seller. Okay, and what that does is it cuts you out of the equation. So this is the buyer asking the seller, and not the broker asking the seller. And that's very, very important in terms of how this whole system has evolved. Regarding the property as 18 Main Street, and in the event this addendum conflicts with the contract, then this addendum shall control. The seller agrees to pay the sum of, and then you would put in there 2.5% or 2%, to either net or gross selling price. And while we're talking about net or gross selling price, a lot of you don't understand what the difference is between net and gross selling price. And it really should be the net number. So what I mean, let me explain that. Let's say that you offer $600,000 for a piece of property, and you build some closing costs into it, that the seller will pay $10,000 in closing costs. So the seller would be netting $590. The commission would be based on $590 and not $600. So that's really important, because if you put gross and then you put some things in there that the seller is going to be taking care of, and they're not going to be netting that figure, you're going to get some blowback from the listing agent. All right. So, and then the buyer would sign this and the seller would sign this, and that would be establishing your 2.5% into the transaction. And then the next step is it would go on the purchase and sales agreement and specify 2.5% to success, and whatever to the other agent. Okay. So, any questions on Form 310? That's a pretty simple one. All right. The last one that you don't have in front of you is one that I have created, and it's designed for when you're driving around and somebody calls you up and says, "Hey, can I come take a look at your listing? I can meet you there in 20 minutes." All right. It's a showing agreement. It's 1 page, and I'm going to read it to you now. But we're going to have a date on here, and it's between Success Real Estate and the buyer's name, regarding 18 Main Street, Marshfield. And it's going to say something, and we're going to fine tune this a little bit, but before we post it, but it's going to say the prospective buyer listed above hereby understands that the agent showing them the house today works for the seller and in the seller's best interest at all times. The buyer agrees that should they decide to make an offer to purchase on this property within the next 90 days, they do so with the agent showing them the house. Buyer also warrants that they do not have a contractual relationship with another agent at this time. If the buyer requests buyer representation, they can contact Success Management and they will be assigned a buyer representative at no cost to the buyer. So what we need is a document, something fast, because the exclusive buyer agency agreement, which is 701 again, it's 2 pages, and they're not going to want to sign it. But they've got to sign something acknowledging that they were here and that they're agreeing to buy the house through us. This will short circuit them saying, hey, thanks for showing me the house. Now I'm going to go back to my buyer agent and he's going to put in the offer. This agreement is going to short circuit that. There are 2 documents that you're going to need to have people sign before you start showing them property. One is going to be the agency disclosure notice. And if you're showing them your listing, you're going to be the seller's representative. Okay, so you're going to explain to them that, hey, I work for the seller. The only thing we really have to negotiate here is the price. Other than that, you're my customer, you're my buyer. I want to make sure that 5 years from now, when you want to sell, you come back to me and everything works out perfect. But the only thing we really need to discuss is the price. And if they say, no, I'm not doing that. You work for the seller. I need representation. Then have them contact me, and it'll either be myself or somebody else that represents them and in their interests in the transaction. Now, when you go out on a listing call, it's important that you discuss that the scenario of what happens if you bring in the buyer. So in other words, if you as a listing agent are going to get 2.5%, but what if you get the buyer too? That has to be discussed. And I don't think you should do it for 2.5%. Say, hey, if I get the buyer, I get the buyer. 2.5, you save yourself 2.5. I think you should build some percentage in there. So if you come up with the buyer, you could be showing a buyer, your buyer client, properties, 20, 30 properties. So you should be getting paid for that. So I would, when you're talking to your listing, say, if it's me that brings in the buyer, normally I would get 2.5%, but, I'll do it for 2%. So you've got a 4.5% commission, so to speak. Does everybody understand that? And how important that is to have that discussion with them, given the circumstances? If you have any questions about that, just let me know. And as far as our representation, if you call me and say, Steve, they've insisted that they have you represent them in the transaction, I will do that. I will negotiate the price on their behalf, but I will not go to home inspections. I will not do appraisals and things like that. So once the terms have been established, then I'll pass the baton back to you in terms of completing the transaction. And you may ask, is there a fee for that? No, there will not be a fee for that. If I have to do more, then we can discuss that. But we shouldn't really have to do that. Sean's asking, Steve, in that scenario, should we have the seller sign exclusive listing agreement with consent to dual agency? Sean, I don't believe we should, and I'll tell you why. Because when you go on a listing presentation, they are signing up with you. They are putting their trust in you. And it's important that they trust everything that you're telling them. And if suddenly you have to change hats because it's your buyer client, then they're not going to, you're gonna lose their trust. So at this time, we're not going to be practicing dual agency because the buyers and the sellers have two completely different agendas, and it's really virtually impossible to represent them fully and equally if they have two different agendas, and that's never going to change. So we'll keep it as designated agency right now. And if things evolve, I'll reconsider it. But for now, we'll keep it as it stands. So I think that is pretty much it in terms of the new documents. Christine is going to be uploading to our seller clients and to our buyer clients. You can take a look at that. If you want to make some changes, we will look at the changes and we might incorporate them. Christine says they're already on the intranet, which is good. And if you don't want to use them, that's your prerogative too. What we're trying to do here is we're just trying to explain it first to you and then to your clients, and explain that and we're trying our best to try to explain a complicated situation in the most simplistic way possible. And getting back to Trisha's comments a little while ago, that the dialogue is too complicated. It is complicated. I agree, but it's a complicated when you're talking about money. There's got to be clear transparency, and it's not necessarily an easy subject, which is why we're going to be doing these one-to-one meetings so that you understand and any questions that you have are taken care of. So the only thing that we have that you're not going to see up there right now is the showing agreement, which is right here, which we're going to be working on, and we'll have that uploaded probably by tomorrow. All right. So any other questions? All right. So I thank all of you for attending. I know that Catherine Taylor had mentioned that there's and I think Kim had mentioned as well, that there's a buyer class that's free through MAR. And I think everybody should be taking that. And again, if you have any questions about this, pick up the phone. It's probably better to call me than to text me on these kind of issues, because it's a complicated process. And know this, that it may seem complicated right now, but as you start to practice this in your everyday real estate life, it will become easier and easier and easier. And like I said, I do not think that buyer agency is going to go the way of the dodo. I think it's too important. And, every time I'm on social media or something like that, I always see, it's the end of this and the end of that. I don't think so. Everybody's been saying, every time I go to the National Association of Realtors conference, and I've been going for 30 years, they've always said, don't worry, it's too complicated. And each year it happens. We don't get nixed out of the equation. So I think everybody's career is safe. And I think it's just a new way of doing things. All right. So we're going to be contacting you over the next probably 30 to 60 days for a one-to-one. And we're probably going to be doing it through Zoom or through face-to-face. So you don't have to, come to the office to meet me. It'll probably be about 15 minutes or so to make sure you don't have any questions or anything like that. But in the meantime, if you do have any questions about any of these forms, I am here for you. Okay, so thanks, everybody, and have a good day and have a nice Easter. Bye-bye.